Welcome back, dear friends, and a warm hello to the first-time visitors of my channel. Today, we'll explore one of the most mysterious and controversial figures in the wizarding world, Bellatrix Lestrange. Cruel, insane, fanatical? Yes. But the truth runs deeper. There are many myths surrounding Bellatrix, and it's time to break them down. Get ready to see the Dark Lord's favorite servant in a completely new light. Number 1. Madness, more like fanatical clarity. At first glance, Bellatrix seems like your classic psychopath in black robes, laughing maniacally, killing without remorse, obsessed with the Dark Lord. But the real danger lies in the fact that she wasn't insane at all. She knew exactly what she was doing. Her actions weren't born of hysteria, but of cold, calculated belief. Bellatrix didn't just follow Voldemort, she believed in him, and that belief made her more terrifying than any raving lunatic. Number 2. A natural-born warrior. While most Death Eaters looked menacing but crumbled under pressure, Bellatrix was genuinely deadly. This isn't hyperbole. She fought Hermione, Ginny, and Luna at the same time and held her ground. She wasn't just a crazy lady flailing in battle. She was a living weapon, one of the few who could truly fight and win. Number 3, she wasn't beautiful in the books. Helena Bonham Carter brought her to life with a captivating blend of madness and flair. But the book version of Bellatrix is a different story altogether. After 15 years in Azkaban, her face was gaunt, her features nearly unrecognizable. Dementor exposure, starvation, and isolation had turned the once stunning aristocrat into a hollowed-out spectre of pain. Her appearance was a haunting reminder of the torment she endured and survived. Number 4, she had a child with Voldemort. Did you know Bellatrix had a daughter? Not with Rodolphus, and their marriage was largely symbolic, but with Voldemort himself. Delphi, the enigmatic character from The Cursed Child, is the product of that twisted union. When did it happen? Sometime between Order of the Phoenix and Half-Blood Prince. How? No one truly knows, but the fact remains Bellatrix became a mother, and that reframes everything we thought we knew about her. Number 5, one of the few women among the Death Eaters. The Death Eaters were a ruthless, male-dominated club. Bellatrix was a rare exception. Alongside Alecto Caro, she was one of the only women who stood on the front lines of Voldemort's army. This says a lot, not just about Bellatrix, but about the patriarchal structure of the organization. Despite her cruelty and loyalty, Bellatrix had to claw her way up in a world where even villains didn't take women seriously. Number 6, she knew how to love, not just Voldemort. We usually see Bellatrix as a woman hopelessly devoted to Voldemort. And that's true, but it wasn't her only emotional connection. Kreacher, the Black family's surly house elf, kept a portrait of her by his bedside. The same Kreacher, who despised nearly everyone else, loved Bellatrix. Why? Because she treated him with kindness. It's unexpected but shows that even in her twisted heart, Bellatrix had space for genuine affection. Number 7, she didn't care about Voldemort's dirty blood. Voldemort's ideology was built on blood purity. The irony, he was a half-blood. And Bellatrix, who knew this, didn't care. She didn't just overlook it, she elevated her loyalty above doctrine. To devote yourself to someone who contradicts your own beliefs, that's not naivete, that's absolute devotion. Or maybe love. Number 8. She didn't go to school with Snape. This myth pops up time and again that Bellatrix and Snape were classmates, recruited together, trained side by side. But simple math shatters that idea. Bellatrix was born in 1951, Snape in 1960. By the time he arrived at Hogwarts, she was long gone. Yes, they later served the same master, but they were never schoolmates. Number 9, she hated her entire family. Bellatrix Lestrange didn't hate her whole family. She wasn't cold to all the Blacks. Her loyalty had rules. If you stood with her, if you stood with him, you were family. If you didn't, you were dead to her. That's why she hated Sirius. That's why she adored Narcissa. She and Narcissa were close, sisters by blood, allies by belief. In Half-Blood Prince, it was Bellatrix who followed Narcissa to Snape's house, not to comfort her, but to protect her, to question Snape, to make sure he was truly loyal. Bellatrix didn't trust easily, but she loved her sister enough to try. "The Dark Lord trusts him," she asked sharply. The fear wasn't just for Voldemort, it was for her family. She wanted to shield them, if they stayed on her path. Narcissa was loyal, Draco was still young. Bellatrix didn't scold them when things went wrong. She fought for them, panicked when Draco struggled, screamed when she feared they might suffer. That wasn't hate, that was love, twisted through fanaticism. Her love had limits. Sirius had crossed them. He mocked her, abandoned the family's pure blood pride, so she killed him without hesitation. Not because she didn't care, because in her mind he had betrayed them all. Number 10. She was afraid of Voldemort. Bellatrix Lestrange didn't fear Voldemort. She worshipped him. Every glance, every word from him lit something inside her. This wasn't fear of punishment. It was devotion, obsession. She didn't follow him to stay alive. She followed him because he was her life. She looked at him like a god. In the Half-Blood Prince, she knelt beside him, hungry for approval. When others hesitated, she stepped forward. When Snape spoke calmly, she boiled with jealousy. She wanted to be seen, to be chosen, not out of fear, but out of longing. "I would give everything for you, my lord," she whispered once, and she meant it. Fear creates silence, distance. Bellatrix wanted closeness. She interrupted him, touched him, laughed near him. She didn't flinch when he got angry. She flinched when he ignored her. That was her weakness, not pain, not death, but his silence. In Deathly Hallows, when Voldemort took the Elder Wand, Bellatrix didn't cower. She watched him like a lover watches a god, eyes wide, lips parted. Her fear wasn't that he might hurt her. Her fear was that she might fail him, that he might stop needing her. Number 11, she felt no regrets. Bellatrix Lestrange looked untouchable, ice in her veins, fire in her wand, no fear, no guilt. That's how we remember her, but even stone can crack, and one moment proved it. Malfoy Manor. The prisoners were dragged in, bloody, bruised. Bellatrix barely glanced at them until she saw it, the sword of Gryffindor. Her eyes locked on it. She stopped breathing. Her face went pale. The sword was supposed to be in her Gringotts vault. Panic hit her like a curse. "Where did you get this sword?" she hissed, not with rage, but with terror. Real terror. Her voice shook. Her hands trembled. She wasn't worried about a weapon. She was worried about what it meant. Someone had broken her protection, her vault, her duty. This wasn't fear of death. It wasn't fear of Azkaban. It was fear of him, of Voldemort, of failing him, of letting him down. That sword wasn't just a relic, it was a mirror. It showed her failure, her weakness, and it broke something inside her. Bellatrix didn't collapse, but she cracked. The scream she let out wasn't rage, it was desperation. It came from the part of her she never let anyone see, the part that doubted, that regretted, that feared being not enough. She had built her life on loyalty, brutal, blind loyalty. Every act of cruelty was done in his name. Every victim, every scar, every broken life, offered like a gift. And now in that moment it wasn't enough. Her vault was compromised, her faith shaken, her heart pierced by shame. So no, she wasn't heartless. She just buried it deeper than anyone else. But guilt lives in silence. It waits, and in that moment it screamed louder than any curse. Number 12, she was mindlessly cruel. Bellatrix Lestrange was cruel, no question. But she wasn't wild, not like people think. Her violence had purpose. Her madness had rules. She didn't lash out at random. She hunted, she planned. She destroyed with reason. People call her mindless, a sadist who hurt for fun, but that's not the full truth. She hurt for him, for Voldemort. Every curse she cast had a direction. Every scream she pulled from her victims served a goal. She wasn't chaos, she was devotion, weaponized. Take Frank and Alice Longbottom. She didn't torture them for pleasure. She wanted information. Where was the Dark Lord? Had they seen him? Were they hiding him? Frank broke first, then Alice. She didn't stop, not until their minds shattered. That wasn't madness, that was faith taken to the edge. At her trial she stood tall, proud. "The Dark Lord will rise again, and we shall be rewarded." She wasn't ashamed. She thought she was right. She still did. That's the part people forget. She never stopped believing. Years later, in Malfoy Manor, it happened again. She saw the sword of Gryffindor. She thought it had been stolen from her master. She lost control, dragged Hermione away. "Where did you get this sword?" Her voice cracked. Her hand shook, not from fear, from fury, from loyalty. She carved into Hermione's skin, not to play, not for joy, to protect, to defend Voldemort's legacy. She thought she was saving him, serving him. That pain had a reason, and that reason was everything to her. Bellatrix had no mercy, but she had focus. She never harmed without purpose. If you were loyal, she'd fight for you. If you doubted, she'd bury you. That was the line. That was her code. Number 13, her death was a coincidence. Bellatrix Lestrange didn't die by chance. She wasn't clumsy. She didn't slip. She was killed, cleanly, fiercely, by a mother on fire. Some fans say it was luck, that Molly Weasley got lucky. They're wrong, dead wrong. The moment was electric, chaos around them, death everywhere. And then Bellatrix aimed for Ginny, smiling, laughing, cruel as ever. Molly stepped forward. "Not my daughter, you bitch." The room froze. Even Bellatrix blinked. She didn't take Molly seriously. Most didn't. A housewife? A Weasley? Bellatrix danced around her spells, grinning, until she realized Molly wasn't playing. Her fury was cold, focused. Every spell she cast hit like a hammer. Bellatrix fought for the Dark Lord. Molly fought for her child. That made all the difference. One fought for power, the other for love. And love, in that moment, burned brighter than any curse. Rowling knew what she was doing. This wasn't random, it was justice. Bellatrix had taken too much. Sirius, Tonks, Fred. Her hands were soaked in blood, and now she stood before a mother with nothing left to lose. The final blow hit her chest. She froze, eyes wide, shocked. For the first time she looked afraid, then she crumpled. The crowd stared. Even Voldemort turned, his most loyal, most vicious soldier gone. Just like that. It wasn't luck, it was rage sharpened by love. It was grief turned into lightning. It was a mother saying, "Enough." Bellatrix didn't die because she was weak. She died because, for once, she wasn't the strongest one in the room. Number 14, she despised weak wizards. Bellatrix Lestrange didn't hate weak magic. She hated weak minds. Doubt disgusted her. Cowardice made her furious. Power wasn't about spells, it was about loyalty, fire, purpose. She didn't need you to be strong. She needed you to believe. People say she looked down on those with less skill. That's wrong. She wasn't blind. She saw potential in anyone who worshipped the Dark Lord. If they hesitated, she tested them. If they broke, she spat on them. If they stood tall, she stood beside them. Draco Malfoy was never strong. His hands trembled. His wand slipped, but Bellatrix didn't mock him. In Half-Blood Prince, she was worried. Genuinely. "The Dark Lord has ordered Draco to perform a task," she told Snape. Her voice was cold, but her eyes betrayed fear. She didn't trust his strength, but she still wanted him alive. At Malfoy Manor, she tried to protect him. When the Snatchers brought in Harry, she panicked. If the Dark Lord returns and finds them escaped... She was breathless, not for herself, for the boy, for the family. That wasn't scorn, that was fear, twisted love, a desperate need to keep them safe. But traitors! She hated them with venom. Peter Pettigrew begged, she snarled. "You should be grateful," she said. "The Dark Lord might still find use for you." It wasn't weakness that repulsed her. It was the way he crawled. No pride, no fire. She trained the loyal. She punished the hesitant. To her, belief mattered more than skill. She'd take a faithful fool over a brilliant coward every time. Her magic came from madness, but her loyalty was pure. Bellatrix followed Voldemort because he gave her purpose. He made the world clear, strong and weak, loyal and traitor. She expected others to see it too, and if they didn't, if they blinked, she burned them. Number 15. Her wand was special. Bellatrix Lestrange's wand looked like any other. Walnut wood, dragon heartstring core, a strong pairing, but not rare. Ollivander made many just like it. There was no ancient curse on it, no dark history, no hidden power. It was her who made it terrifying. In Order of the Phoenix, she faced Harry and cast the Cruciatus curse. "You need to mean it, Potter," she whispered, her eyes shining. "You need to really want to cause pain." And she did. She meant every spell. The wand didn't amplify her. It barely kept up. She poured madness into it like lightning through a wire. Fans loved to say her wand was special, forged in secret, infused with blood magic, that it bonded only to her. But none of it is true. Ollivander never mentioned it in awe. He never warned anyone. To him it was just another wand, but in Bellatrix's grip it became something else. She didn't just cast spells, she danced them. At the Department of Mysteries, she spun like fire, laughing, screaming, casting curses between breaths. Sirius Black, her own cousin, fell to her wand, not because it was powerful, because she was ruthless, and she loved the kill. Later, Hermione held that same wand. It didn't resist. It didn't remember. She said, "It's an elegant wand." And that was it. No flicker of Bellatrix's madness, no trace of blood, just wood, just dragon heartstring. Silent now. Think of the Elder Wand, ancient, proud, cursed. It chose its master. It changed the fate of wars. Bellatrix's wand didn't care who held it. It had no will. It had no soul. The magic was never in the wand. It was in her, twisted, loyal, burning like wildfire. Number 16. She never doubted Voldemort's ideas. Bellatrix Lestrange always stood at Voldemort's side like a shadow born from his will. A violent whisper, a loyal flame burning with cruel devotion. From the very moment she appeared in Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, her eyes gleamed with a manic fire that left no room for hesitation. To fans, she was the ultimate fanatic, the one Death Eater who would die laughing for her master. She was madness in human form, dangerous, gleeful, and merciless. But if we watch her more closely, really look not through the eyes of Harry, but through the lens of human vulnerability, we may find that even in her twisted soul, a tremor of doubt dared to rise, however brief and buried. There's a scene in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows that many skim past too quickly. Voldemort has taken refuge at Malfoy Manor, and the once proud Lucius Malfoy now grovels in disgrace. His family, once held in high regard among the Death Eaters, is humiliated day after day by the Dark Lord's icy disdain. It is here, in the suffocating gloom of the manor's drawing room, that we see Bellatrix's mask slip. Just a little. When Voldemort mocks Lucius and threatens Draco, Bellatrix doesn't laugh. She doesn't smirk or jeer. She stares. And in her stare there is more than loyalty. There is fear. There is confusion. "You dare speak to me," Voldemort says, his voice like cold silk. "You have lost my trust, Lucius. Your failure cost me time, precious time." Bellatrix remains silent. She does not speak in his defense, but neither does she smirk at his disgrace. She stands rigid, pale, and her eyes flick toward Narcissa, her sister, her family. It is this, perhaps, that stirs something in her, something that the madness hadn't killed completely. The Lestrange blood ran deep, but so did the Black family pride. And now her family was trembling before Voldemort like children before a storm. It is easy to dismiss this as fear, but Bellatrix had never feared battle. She laughed in the face of duels. She had faced auras, cursed Sirius Black, and endured 12 years in Azkaban. But what we see here isn't fear of death. It's something deeper, the cracking of certainty. The person she worshipped, the one she had called my lord, with feverish passion, was now using her family as a pawn. He was playing with their lives, coldly, carelessly. And Bellatrix, was she exempt from that treatment? She tried to speak. That was rare. "My lord," she whispered, her voice tight. "Perhaps Draco should—" "Enough," Voldemort snapped, and she fell silent instantly, trembling. The fact that she spoke at all is remarkable. Bellatrix, who considered Voldemort the master of life and death, dared to interject. That was not obedience, that was desperation, or worse, doubt. In the book, her words are interrupted and never finish, but the damage is done. She dared to plead, not for herself, but for her nephew. Family, again, it's an echo of something deeply human, a sister's protective instinct, a woman suddenly realizing that loyalty, no matter how passionate, offers no shield against a master who sees only use and failure. Bellatrix was always theatrical. Her madness was her armor. She reveled in violence because violence distracted her from the cold realities. But even madness cannot blind the heart completely. In the dungeons of Malfoy Manor, she questions Hermione under torture, trying to confirm the identity of Gryffindor's sword. She actually panics, at the thought that someone might have broken into her Gringotts vault. "If that is real," she screams, "and they took it, my lord will be so angry." This is not the voice of calm loyalty. This is fear of consequence. She knows what Voldemort is capable of, not just toward his enemies, but toward his own. Her fear is not for justice or for right or wrong. It is the fear of a servant who suddenly realizes the master's wrath is absolute, unrelenting, and personal. When Harry, Ron, and Hermione escape from the manor, Bellatrix is unhinged. But the chaos is not only because of failure. It's because the sword was there. The item she swore was safe, hidden in her vault, was being used to destroy Voldemort's Horcruxes. She doesn't understand how. She doesn't know what it means. But she is unraveling. And in her unraveling, we see that her certainty is not unbreakable. Voldemort had secrets, deep, guarded ones. Even Bellatrix didn't know about the Horcruxes. She never asked. Or if she did, she was silenced. The Voldemort she followed wasn't supposed to keep secrets from her. In her mind, she was the chosen one among his servants, the favorite, the beloved. But when secrets are revealed to strangers and kept from you, how long before your faith begins to bleed? And bleed it did. Quietly, silently. She never betrayed him, but she began to act erratically. She killed without thought, screamed without reason. Her behavior became increasingly unstable, and the other Death Eaters began to watch her warily. Even Voldemort in his final days gave her less attention. He was obsessed with the Elder Wand, with death, with Potter. And Bellatrix? She was a weapon he had used so many times she had started to fracture. The Battle of Hogwarts shows her final stand. She duels Hermione, Ginny, and Luna at once. She laughs, shrieks, defies death itself. And yet when Molly Weasley faces her, something shifts. Bellatrix mocks Molly's love for her children. "What will happen to your children when I've killed you?" she taunts. But there is something rehearsed in her tone, as if trying to convince herself that love is weakness, and then she dies, not laughing, not smiling, but wide-eyed, shocked and disbelieving, because the love she mocked is what defeated her. The love she had tried to crush out of herself, to replace with obsession and blind faith, proved stronger. And perhaps in that final instant, she understood. Number 17, she had no talents beyond combat magic. They say she was born for destruction, a creature of chaos crafted from fire and shadow. In the popular imagination, Bellatrix Lestrange remains an icon of madness and mayhem, a deranged murderer cackling through a battlefield of curses. Yet this image is a cage built from only a fragment of who she was. Those who saw only her dueling in the Department of Mysteries or torturing her victims with Cruciatus missed something far more unsettling. Bellatrix was brilliant. Her talent for combat magic was undeniable, of course. Even Voldemort, the Dark Lord himself, praised her for her skill, and he was not one to hand out compliments. "You have proved yourself loyal and brave," he told her in The Half-Blood Prince, his voice laced with admiration. But this bravery, this savagery, was merely the edge of a much sharper blade. Bellatrix was more than a warrior. She was a scholar of pain, a tactician of fear, and a mistress of the unseen arts. Take occlumency, for example. Among all the Death Eaters, only a select few could wield it with any degree of mastery. Snape, of course, was known for his proficiency. But Bellatrix? She endured 14 years in Azkaban, subjected to the soul-sucking torments of Dementors, and emerged with her mind intact. Madness clung to her, yes, but it was not the madness of a shattered mind. It was weaponized, controlled, strategic. A person who had truly lost her mind could not have deceived the Ministry, maintained secrets for the Dark Lord, or navigated the treacherous politics of the Death Eaters. She was no fool. She was a fortress. "She's mad, isn't she?" Ron had whispered during the battle of the Department of Mysteries. But Hermione, sharp as always, had not answered. Perhaps even she sensed that there was something more there, something methodical under the madness. Madness, after all, was often a mask for cunning. Bellatrix's talents extended into potions, a skill often overlooked because it lacks the flash of a duel. But brewing is an art of patience and precision, qualities not typically associated with her, and yet she had them. Narcissa, her sister, trusted only Bellatrix to accompany her to Spinner's End, to plead for Draco's safety, not Lucius, not other Death Eaters. Bellatrix, and only Bellatrix. Because Bellatrix knew not just how to kill, but how to speak, how to manipulate, how to understand. The human psyche. If you are planning to poison him, and I assure you I would have the antidote ready, she had said with quiet venom to Snape. That wasn't a threat, it was a statement of skill. She could brew an antidote. She knew what poisons smelled like. She had knowledge far beyond the battlefield. Then there were her spells, the intricate ones, the ones not meant to destroy but to protect, to bind, to ensnare. Protective charms were rarely associated with Death Eaters, yet in the Deathly Hallows, when the trio is captured and brought to Malfoy Manor, who is it that casts the complex enchantments that prevent escape? Bellatrix. Who casts the binding spells, the anti-apparition jinxes, the charms that force Hermione to scream in agony without touching her wand? Bellatrix. Again, there is elegance in such cruelty, the elegance of understanding magical architecture. Only a true master can manipulate such layers of magic simultaneously. And she did it without a second thought. Her duel with Hermione was never shown directly in the books, but what was shown, Hermione's condition afterward, spoke volumes. She wasn't simply tortured. She was surgically undone. The word mudblood carved into her arm was not merely an act of violence. It was a message, a mark of dominance, an act of symbolic warfare. Bellatrix didn't just destroy Dai, she designed destruction. Those who dismiss her as merely a wild dog forget her roots. She was a black, raised in the old ways, trained in the elite circles of pure blood society. She attended Hogwarts, not just attended, but thrived. We don't know the names of her classmates, but we know she earned the respect of people like Voldemort, Lucius Malfoy, and even Snape. These were not men who surrounded themselves with incompetence. Bellatrix's education was elite, her upbringing was elite, and her ambition, it was blinding. Her loyalty to Voldemort has often been described as fanaticism. But what if it was something deeper, something more intimate? Her understanding of his plans, his ideology, his needs was far superior to that of the average follower. She saw his vision not as madness, but as a blueprint. While others stumbled around him, Bellatrix moved with clarity. Her passion wasn't blind, it was precise. When she duelled Molly Weasley, her final opponent, it wasn't a simple battle. Bellatrix held her own against a mother enraged by grief. Arguably, the most dangerous kind of opponent. "Not my daughter, you bitch!" Molly screamed, but Bellatrix laughed. She laughed. not because she underestimated Molly, but because she believed she would win. That confidence was not delusion, it was based on years of victorious duels, of surviving the impossible, of understanding spells others couldn't pronounce. We rarely consider that her marriage to Rodolphus Lestrange was a political one. Her true affection, her true loyalty, was always to Voldemort. This in itself reveals something critical. She was calculating. She knew the value of appearances, of alliances, of positioning herself within the power structure. This isn't madness, this is politics. She also understood fear. Not the kind you feel, the kind you cause. "You need to mean it," she whispered to Harry when teaching him the Cruciatus curse. "You need to really want to cause pain, to enjoy it." In that moment, she revealed her own mastery, yes, but also a deep understanding of magical intent. She knew that magic is not just about incantation, but about will, desire, emotion. Few wizards grasped this concept so fully. Bellatrix lived it. Number 18, she always hated Harry Potter. She always hated Harry Potter. Or at least that's what many believe. But hatred, the kind that poisons the soul and drives people to madness, is not born in an instant. It festers, it builds. And in the case of Bellatrix Lestrange, it took years of loss, failure, and humiliation before her hatred for the boy who lived consumed her entirely. At first, Bellatrix regarded Harry Potter with a sneer of disdain. He was nothing more than a symbol of a mistake, a boy who should have died the night the Dark Lord fell. When she escaped from Azkaban in 1996, along with 9 other Death Eaters, her heart burned with renewed purpose. But Harry himself? He was just a name, a face, a reminder of Voldemort's one great failure. "The Dark Lord will rise again, Sissy," she whispered to her sister Narcissa. "And when he does, he will finish what he started." That was her belief. Not that Harry was powerful, only that he had been lucky, child's luck, a fluke. Her first real encounter with him after her escape came at the Department of Mysteries. She had already killed Sirius Black, her own cousin, and laughed as his body slipped through the veil. "I killed Sirius Black," she taunted, dancing away from the heartbroken boy. "Did you love him, little baby Potter?" she mocked. In that moment, Harry's screams weren't just grief, they were a spark. Bellatrix saw for the first time the raw power he carried within. He chased her through the ruins of the department, casting Cruciatus with trembling hands. It barely worked, but it did work. "You need to mean it, Potter," she hissed, shocked that he had even touched. The curse. You need to really want to cause pain to enjoy it. It was then that she began to feel it, unease. This boy, this child, had cast an unforgivable curse on her. No one but true followers of the Dark Lord had ever dared. It wasn't mastery, but it was audacity. And that Bellatrix did not forgive, not when it came from someone she saw as nothing more than filth born of traitors. Bellatrix had always worshipped Voldemort like a god. To her, he was power incarnate, a pure being born to rule. She had suffered 13 years in Azkaban for him, refusing to betray him even when madness clawed at her sanity. She screamed her loyalty into the stone walls, whispered his name in the cold silence. And now this boy was not only the one who vanquished her master once, he was now daring to defy him again. That defiance stung her like a hot blade. Over the next year, her hatred fermented. At Malfoy Manor, when Harry, Ron, and Hermione were captured, Bellatrix got a second chance. She tortured Hermione without mercy, carving into her skin. But Harry was always the one who escaped. Even when they had him cornered, the boy slipped through her fingers like smoke. And worse, he humiliated her again. Dobby, a house elf, disarmed her and rescued the captives right under her nose. She screamed in fury, throwing a knife that struck the elf in the chest, but her pride was already bleeding. "You dare use my wand!" she shrieked. She, Bellatrix Lestrange, pure-blood heiress of the House of Black, had been bested by a servant and a boy. By this time, her obsession with Harry had grown dangerous. She spoke of him with venom. When Voldemort brought her into his inner circle once more, she was always the first to volunteer to hunt Potter. "He is mine," she growled more than once, and no one dared challenge her claim. Even Lucius, fallen from grace, avoided her gaze, but it was at the Battle of Hogwarts that her hatred reached its zenith. Voldemort had ordered her to protect his most precious treasure, Nagini, and yet Harry Potter, bloodied and defiant, marched into the forest, ready to die. Bellatrix watched from the shadows as her master cast the killing curse once more. For a moment she believed it was over, that at last the boy who defied them was gone. But he returned, alive, stronger, and the cracks in Bellatrix's world began to widen. She fought like a beast that night. With every spell, every curse, she screamed her fury. She duelled with three at once: Ginny Weasley, Luna Lovegood, and Hermione Granger, three young women who dared stand against her. "You filthy little blood traitors," she shouted. "Do you know who I am?" She could barely contain the rage. Potter had returned. Her lord was failing. The world was turning to ash, and all she had ever believed in was crumbling. Then came the final blow: Molly Weasley. Bellatrix mocked her, laughed at her mother's fury. "What will happen to your children when I'm finished with you?" she snarled. But she underestimated her opponent. Molly's spell struck like a hammer. Bellatrix froze, the light seared through her chest, and she collapsed, lifeless. Her last thought, perhaps, was not of Voldemort. It was of Harry, the boy who had dismantled her world, brick by brick. Looking back, it becomes clear that Bellatrix's hatred was never about ideology. She didn't hate Harry because he was on the light side. She didn't care about Dumbledore's teachings or the Order of the Phoenix. Her hatred was deeply personal, rooted in pain and pride. She hated that he lived when so many she loved had died. She hated that he inspired loyalty, that people followed him. Most of all, she hated that he defeated her master, not once, but over and over again. In a twisted way, Bellatrix feared him. She feared what he represented: a world where Voldemort could be wrong, a world where blood didn't matter, a world where even a half-blood like Harry Potter could become the symbol of resistance. And Bellatrix, for all her madness, could not bear that. She had built her entire life on the belief that power came from purity and devotion to the Dark Lord. Harry shattered that illusion. Number 19, she hated Muggles from the beginning. Bellatrix Black was born into one of the most prestigious wizarding families in Britain, one where the word prestigious didn't just mean powerful or wealthy. In the House of Black, it meant pure. Pure of blood, pure of lineage, pure of thought. But even in a family that prided itself on purity, young Bellatrix stood out, not because she was cruel, not yet, but because she was curious. Her black eyes sparkled not with hatred, but with questions. Why were the rules so strict? Why did her mother, Druella, scold her for asking about the children across the street, the ones who didn't have magic? She wasn't born hating Muggles, no child is, but she was born into a world where that hatred was passed down like a treasured family heirloom. At first, it wasn't hatred, it was just silence. At family dinners, her Uncle Cygnus would raise a toast to our noble and most ancient blood, and no one would explain what that meant. Her cousin Sirius, younger and too bold for his own good, once asked aloud, "Why don't we ever talk to the Muggle neighbours?" He was hushed, eyes narrowing around the table. Bellatrix watched, learned. You don't ask, you don't stray, you don't wonder. By the time Bellatrix reached 11 and received her letter to Hogwarts, she had absorbed the unspoken truths of her household, like dust clinging to velvet. She was sorted into Slytherin, of course. There was no other path for her, but even there, something in her hardened. She had always been proud, but now pride turned to performance. She sneered at Muggleborns, not because she understood the hatred, but because it was expected. She called Lily Evans a filthy mudblood in second year, echoing words she had heard from her Aunt Walburga's shrill mouth. But when she saw the pain in Lily's eyes, a flicker of confusion passed through her. Why did this insult cut so deeply? It was in her fourth year that Bellatrix first heard the name Tom Riddle spoken with awe. He was gone from Hogwarts by then, but his legacy was thick in the dungeon air. Older students spoke of him in whispers, how he had challenged Dumbledore's authority, how he knew magic beyond anything taught in books. Some said he was forming a movement. Others said he already had followers, loyal ones. Bellatrix listened, not with skepticism, but with hunger. She met him one cold December night, when he returned to Hogwarts under the guise of visiting Slughorn. She wasn't supposed to be there, but she lingered in the corridor, watching him from the shadows. His presence was magnetic, his voice soft and commanding. "You're one of the Blacks," he said, without turning. She stepped into the light. "I know your bloodline. It is unspoiled." Bellatrix flushed with something she didn't recognize, admiration perhaps, or the desire to be noticed. From that moment, something changed. Tom Riddle, now known only as the Dark Lord, did not speak of Muggles as weak or foolish. He called them diseased. He didn't simply preach purity, he promised power. Bellatrix, who had grown up obeying rules, now saw the possibility of rewriting them. And not just rewriting, burning them down. She didn't join him overnight. That would come later. But in her heart, she had already chosen. She read books that whispered of ancient magic and blood rites. She practiced curses in secret. In her 7th year, she hexed a Muggle-born girl in the courtyard until her nose bled uncontrollably. When Professor McGonagall intervened, Bellatrix smiled and said it was just a joke. No one laughed. After Hogwarts, the transformation accelerated. Freed from the restraints of school, Bellatrix immersed herself in the ideology of the Dark Lord. She attended clandestine gatherings in forgotten manors. She watched as Muggles were tortured, their screams echoing through stone halls. At first, she was silent. Then she laughed, or then she joined in. Each act stripped away a layer of her former self until only the fanatic remained. But it is too simplistic to say she always hated Muggles, that her heart was born twisted. In truth, she was taught to see them as lesser. Then she chose to believe they were threatening. Voldemort made hatred feel like strength. He made cruelty feel like clarity. When he told her there is no good and evil, only power, she didn't question it. She embraced it. And yet the hatred she displayed was not mindless. It was ritualistic, almost sacred. When she tortured Hermione Granger in Malfoy Manor, it wasn't random. She carved the word mudblood into the girl's arm, not because she enjoyed it, though she did, but because she believed it mattered. "You filthy little blood traitor," she hissed. "How dare you defile the sacred house of Black?" Her voice was trembling with something close to reverence. Narcissa, her sister, once tried to reach her. "Bella," she whispered one night, when the war had not yet claimed their futures. "Do you ever wonder what it was like, being born differently? Would you have hated me if I'd been Muggle-born?" Bellatrix didn't answer. She couldn't. Because in some hidden part of her soul, the question terrified her. Even her cousin Sirius understood what she had become. "She's insane," he told Harry. "Completely, utterly insane." But insanity doesn't grow from nowhere. It grows from fear, from pride, from years of carefully cultivated obedience to an idea. Bellatrix did not become Voldemort's most loyal servant because she was born with darkness in her. She became so because she mistook devotion for purpose. During the battle of the Department of Mysteries, she screamed as she fought, not out of fear, but triumph. "I killed Sirius Black," she sang, eyes blazing. But beneath that glee was something else, perhaps the last flicker of recognition for the boy who once asked too many questions. She had killed her cousin, but more than that, she had killed the part of herself that might have questioned once. And still, her loyalty to the Dark Lord was not rooted in logic. It was emotional, nearly romantic. "The Dark Lord will rise again," she said proudly in the courtroom, refusing to plead for mercy. "We are his most loyal followers. We will be rewarded." The hatred she bore toward Muggles and Muggle-borns was no longer simply belief. It was identity. It gave her meaning. It is significant that Bellatrix never questioned the contradictions of her own ideology. Her sister Andromeda, after all, married a Muggle-born and lived a life of quiet dignity. Her own niece, Nymphadora Tonks, was a skilled aura, but Bellatrix saw them not as proof that Muggle-borns could be good, but as betrayers. The world had to be divided, or else it made no sense. There was no room for grey in Bellatrix's mind, only black and white and blood. Even Voldemort, in the end, saw the limits of her devotion. He used her, but never truly trusted her. Her madness was too volatile, her hatred too personal. When she fought Molly Weasley in the Battle of Hogwarts, her final words were laced with scorn. "What will happen to your children when I'm through with you?" she sneered. And in that moment, she died, not at the hand of an enemy, but at the climax of her own blind fury. There is no denying that Bellatrix committed unforgivable acts. She tortured Alice and Frank Longbottom into madness. She slaughtered without remorse. But to say she was born hating Muggles is to ignore the tragedy of her descent. She was not a monster from the cradle. She was a girl born into a house of whispers and walls, and she chose again and again to embrace the fire rather than the light. In Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, Dumbledore says, "It is our choices that show what we truly are, far more than our abilities." Bellatrix had abilities, she had power, but her choices to hate, to kill, to kneel revealed a truth more terrifying than any curse. That hatred, when fed enough times, becomes indistinguishable from identity. In the end, Bellatrix Lestrange was not the product of a single idea, but of a system, a tapestry of bloodlines, fear, and ambition. She was a mirror held up to the wizarding world, showing what happens when tradition becomes dogma, and dogma becomes war. Her story is not just one of evil, it is a warning. And so we remember her not only for what she did, but for what she might have been, had someone answered her questions instead of silencing them, had someone told her that blood does not make a soul, that power without compassion is nothing but ruin. Number 20. She always dreamed of becoming Voldemort's right hand. It was never about power. That's the first thing people always get wrong about Bellatrix Lestrange. She didn't crave control, she didn't hunger for the throne, she was not a schemer like Lucius Malfoy, nor a politician like Barty Crouch Jr. She was something else entirely, a creature forged in obsession, sharpened by loyalty and consumed by love. To say she wanted to be Voldemort's right hand is to misunderstand the very essence of her devotion. Bellatrix didn't want to stand beside the Dark Lord. She wanted to kneel before him forever. From her earliest days at Hogwarts, Bellatrix Black was different. A proud Slytherin, yes, and fiercely talented in the dark arts, but there was something else, an emptiness that only one thing would ever fill. When the name Tom Riddle began to swirl among the darker circles of the wizarding world, whispered with reverence and fear, something inside Bellatrix cracked open. When she met him in the flesh for the first time, young, charismatic, with eyes like burning coal, she knew. Her life had found its purpose. She didn't join the Death Eaters for ideology. The pure blood rhetoric was window dressing. Even her marriage to Rodolphus Lestrange, arranged and bloodline approved, meant nothing in the face of the burning adoration she felt for the Dark Lord. Her loyalty didn't come from fear or ambition, it came from worship. When Voldemort spoke, She listened not just with her ears, but with her very soul. Every word he uttered was sacred scripture to her. Every order was a holy command. There's a moment in Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, subtle but telling, when Snape asks Narcissa Malfoy, "Do you really think that the Dark Lord would have entrusted this task to Draco if he had not been sure he could succeed?" Bellatrix, who is present, bristles with protective fury, not for Draco, but for her master's decision. Her every gesture was a defense of his will. She had no identity outside of his purpose. It's often assumed that Bellatrix desired to rise in rank among the Death Eaters, to eclipse others, and become Voldemort's second-in-command. But she never once competed for power. She never questioned orders. Even when others hesitated, like Lucius when he let the prophecy fall, Bellatrix remained faithful, unshaken, zealous. After the Battle of the Department of Mysteries, it was Bellatrix who escaped with her loyalty intact. "You dare speak his name with your unworthy lips, you dare besmirch it with your half-blood's tongue, you dare—" She screamed at Harry, and it wasn't anger, it was religious fury. Bellatrix's reverence was never subtle. During her time in Azkaban, she was known to whisper his name in her sleep. The other prisoners feared her, not just because of what she had done, but because of what she believed. When Voldemort broke her out, her joy was not that of a prisoner freed. It was the ecstasy of a servant reunited with her God. She knelt before him, laughed madly, her eyes wide with adoration. "My lord, our lord," she breathed, trembling. In Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, after Sirius's death, Bellatrix mocks Harry with the glee of a fanatic. "I killed Sirius Black," she sings. "Did you love him, little baby Potter?" But that sadism wasn't meant for Harry. It was an offering, a performance for her master. She wanted Voldemort to see that she was willing to destroy anyone, even family, in his name. Her willingness to hurt, even herself, was unmatched. At Malfoy Manor, when Hermione Granger is captured, Bellatrix carves the word mudblood into the girl's arm, not out of hatred, but as a cruel display of ideology. And when the trio escapes using Gryffindor's sword, Bellatrix doesn't panic over her own safety. She panics over her master's trust. She screams, she rages, she begs. She would have rather died than let him down. That was Bellatrix's tragedy. Her heart was given fully to a man who had none. When Voldemort spoke of Horcruxes, when he split his soul to cheat death, Bellatrix did not flinch. Even when she was not privy to his secrets, she accepted his decisions without question. Other Death Eaters muttered in corridors, questioned tactics, worried about outcomes. Not Bellatrix. If Voldemort had told her to walk off a cliff, she would have done it laughing. If he had demanded her blood, she would have offered her throat. It is telling that she was the only one he trusted to guard a Horcrux, the cup of Helga Hufflepuff. Buried in the vaults of Gringotts, protected by ancient spells, the cup was more than a magical artifact. It was a token of favor. He entrusted it to her because he knew Bellatrix would rather die than lose it. Not because she understood its true nature, but because it was his. Her marriage to Rodolphus was hollow. The Lestranges, both Rodolphus and Rabastan, were loyal, competent Death Eaters. But only Bellatrix burned. Even her sister Narcissa loved with the cautious heart of a mother. Bellatrix had no such restraint. When Voldemort placed his pale hand upon her shoulder, even briefly, she shuddered with pleasure. No woman ever loved with such poison in her veins. Lord Voldemort has never had a friend, nor do I believe that he has ever wanted one, Dumbledore once said. But if Bellatrix had been capable of understanding that, she would not have cared. She did not want his friendship. She wanted to be his blade, his fire, his shadow. A weapon does not complain when it is used. It lives to be wielded. During the Battle of Hogwarts, Bellatrix fought with the desperation of a fanatic whose Messiah was watching. She duelled with savage glee, her eyes searching for his approval. When Molly Weasley killed her, it was not just a tactical loss. It was the extinguishing of the last ember of Voldemort's unwavering worship. No other Death Eater ever loved him like she did. Some have speculated that Bellatrix wanted more than admiration, that she wanted Voldemort's affection. But that is a shallow interpretation. Her love was not romantic, it was devotional. She would have let herself be torn apart just to hear him say her name. Her need was spiritual. In a different life she might have become a prophet, a priestess, or a martyr, but Voldemort offered no salvation, only ruin. Her madness was not born in Azkaban. It was born in that first moment of awe, when she realized she had found someone greater than herself. All her cruelty, her arrogance, her disdain for the weak, it was the armor she wore to defend that one fragile truth, that she needed to believe in something more powerful than the world. Voldemort gave her that illusion, and she gave him her soul. Even among the other Death Eaters, Bellatrix was both feared and pitied. Peter Pettigrew once remarked that she was more loyal than all of us combined, and she was, because she was the only one who didn't have a plan for the future. She wasn't building an empire, she wasn't counting galleons or favors. Her future ended at Voldemort's feet. When he died, she would have followed him. Perhaps in some twisted part of her mind, she imagined they would reign together in some dark afterlife. But that was the final cruelty of her devotion. Voldemort never loved anyone. He could not. His soul had been shredded beyond recognition. And still Bellatrix believed. Until the end, she believed. In Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, when Voldemort turns on Snape, Bellatrix does not hesitate. She does not question the betrayal. To her, Snape had always been suspect, an interloper, a usurper of the Dark Lord's confidence. When Voldemort kills Snape, she watches with approval. She saw it as justice, not for betrayal, but for presumption. No one in her mind should stand closer to the Dark Lord than she. It's easy to dismiss Bellatrix as mad, but madness is rarely so focused. She wasn't aimless, she was purposeful. Every spell she cast, every scream she loosed, was in service to her God, and she believed she had been rewarded not with titles, not with riches, but with proximity. To stand near him was enough. To hear his voice was bliss. No other character in the series exemplifies this kind of single-minded devotion. Lucius craved power. Narcissa craved safety. Even Snape, who risked his life for love, did so from a distance. But Bellatrix, she offered herself completely. In a world of liars and half-loyalties, she was terrifyingly pure. When the ashes of the final battle settled and Voldemort's body lay still, there was no one left to mourn him. No funeral, no grave. But if Bellatrix had lived, she would have built a shrine. She would have whispered prayers. She would have found a way to bring him back. Because Bellatrix Lestrange never wanted power. She wanted purpose. And in Voldemort she found it, burning, cruel, and utterly indifferent. A god who never gave back, and yet she loved him. With every breath, every curse, every drop of blood she spilled, she loved him. Number 21, Bellatrix wasn't afraid of death. Many claim that Bellatrix Lestrange did not fear death, that she danced through the battlefield with a wicked smile, laughed in the face of danger, and never once blinked at the possibility of dying. But that myth dissolves the moment you look beyond the madness. Beneath the cruel sneer and the maniacal laughter was a woman who feared death as deeply as any mortal, only she had buried it under layers of devotion, obsession, and delusion. When she duelled Sirius Black in the Department of Mysteries, her voice rang out with wild excitement. "Come on, you can do better than that," she taunted, her black eyes gleaming with hatred. But in that same battle, when the tide began to turn, when members of the Order began gaining ground, and spells exploded in ways she hadn't anticipated, cracks began to show. As she ran through the corridors of the Ministry, clutching the prophecy orb like a lifeline, Bellatrix did not appear fearless. She appeared desperate. Her eyes darted. Her breath was ragged. Her composure slipped like cracked porcelain. She screamed when Harry chased her, not with confidence, but with fear. "You have to mean it, Potter," she yelled when he attempted the Cruciatus curse on her. "You need to really want to cause pain to enjoy it. Righteous fury won't hurt me for long. I'll show you how it is done, shall I?" Her tone was that of someone both goading and afraid, needing to assert dominance before the situation slipped further beyond her grasp. And then Voldemort appeared. Her fear vanished instantly, not because it was gone, but because she was once again under his shadow. Voldemort was the answer to her panic, her crumbling power. She fell to her knees and whimpered, "My lord," like a child finding their parent after being lost in a storm. Her submission wasn't just loyalty, it was survival. For Bellatrix, the Dark Lord was not simply a leader, he was a godlike shield against mortality. As long as he lived, she could pretend that death would never reach her. When Voldemort rebuked her, coldly, sharply, without a shred of affection, she didn't respond with pride or rebellion. She bowed lower. She did not want to die, and more than that, she did not want to be abandoned. Abandonment to her was a kind of death. Voldemort's power was her meaning. Without him, she was just a woman in Azkaban, rotting among the rats and the ghosts of her sanity. Look back at that same escape from the Department of Mysteries. The moment Voldemort appeared, she did not stand by his side. She fell behind him, trembling. Voldemort raised his wand against Dumbledore, and Bellatrix did not join the duel. She cowered. This is not the image of a fearless warrior. This is the image of a servant who understands that her life is not protected by bravery, but by the proximity to power. Her laugh, so often mistaken for courage, was merely a mask. Insanity is not the absence of fear, it is the inability to process it rationally. Bellatrix laughed when others would scream. But this does not mean she felt nothing. It means she distorted what she felt until it became something grotesque. J.K. Rowling gives us more than enough clues. In The Half-Blood Prince, after the flight from the cave, Harry confronts Snape and Bellatrix as they flee the astronomy tower. Bellatrix casts spells recklessly behind her, destroying Hagrid's hut and laughing as she goes. But why destroy? Why waste energy on chaos while fleeing? The answer is simple. Panic. Bellatrix is trying to regain control. Her chaos is her safety net. If the world burns, she believes she cannot be caught. She is not calm. She is spiraling. Her behavior in the Battle of Hogwarts shatters any remaining illusions. When Voldemort begins to lose, when his Horcruxes fall or one by one, Bellatrix grows more unhinged. Her duel with Hermione, Ginny, and Luna is not elegant or strategic. It is frenzied. She is no longer the predator. She is the cornered animal. Her shrieks echo through the hall, less like spells and more like screams. And then, of course, there is Molly Weasley. The moment Bellatrix dies is the moment all masks fall. "Not my daughter, you bitch!" Molly roars, and Bellatrix, caught off guard, duels with a ferocity that borders on desperation. She doesn't laugh. She doesn't taunt. She doesn't sneer. She fights hard. She gives everything, and yet she dies. If Bellatrix truly believed in glorious martyrdom for the cause of Voldemort, she would have embraced death. But her eyes widened. Her body stiffened. She gasped when the curse struck. This is not the face of a woman ready to die. This is the face of someone betrayed by the promise of invincibility. Even earlier, in Malfoy Manor, her fear is tangible. When Harry, Ron, and Hermione are captured and brought before her, Bellatrix is not the commanding witch she pretends to be. She's terrified that the sword of Gryffindor has fallen into enemy hands. Her panic is so great that she tortures Hermione, not out of pleasure, but out of desperation. "Where did you get this sword?" she screams. "Did that dirty little goblin lie to me?" Her voice breaks. She is not in control. She is on the edge. She demands answers not as a victor interrogating prisoners, but as a frightened follower whose fragile place in Voldemort's world is slipping. If the sword is real, she knows Voldemort will blame her. And if he blames her, she could die, not heroically, not in battle, but quietly, forgotten, cast aside by the only man who ever made her feel powerful. Her fear of death is not the fear of the unknown. It is the fear of meaningless death. Bellatrix needs her death to mean something, needs it to be tied to Voldemort's vision. To die without his blessing, to fall before he conquers, is to become nothing. And Bellatrix Lestrange is terrified of being nothing. In Azkaban, she did not survive by being brave. She survived through obsession. Other Death Eaters lost their minds to the Dementors, but Bellatrix clung to her belief in Voldemort like a raft in a storm. "The Dark Lord will rise again, Crouch," she cried at her trial. "Throw us into Azkaban. We will wait." Her eyes were wild, but her voice never wavered. That wasn't fearlessness, it was fanaticism, a dangerous kind of faith that blinded her to her own mortality. She believed Voldemort would reward her, that he would recognize her loyalty, that through him she would be reborn. "I was and am the Dark Lord's most loyal servant," she said. "I knew he would come back." Her identity was wrapped in his return. Without him, her time in Azkaban would have been for nothing. She couldn't let that happen. Her belief had to be true. It was all she had. But belief is not courage. Courage is knowing you might die and choosing to act anyway. Bellatrix never chose. She ran head first into battle, not because she didn't fear death, but because she couldn't bear the quiet moments where death could creep in. As long as she was casting curses and shouting oaths, she didn't have to hear the whisper at the edge of her mind, "You will die and he won't save you." Narcissa Malfoy, her sister, offers a sharp contrast. Narcissa lies to Voldemort to protect her son. She shows a cold, deliberate bravery, knowing full well that she could be killed for her betrayal. Bellatrix, on the other hand, would have never dared. Her love for Voldemort trumped any bond, but it also exposed her weakness. Narcissa's love made her strong. Bellatrix's made her a puppet. When the final duel began and the Death Eaters began to fall, Bellatrix didn't flee. But not because she was unafraid. She stayed because she could not imagine a world without Voldemort. If he fell, her life lost all meaning. She had to fight, to the death, if necessary, because the alternative was worse. The alternative was surviving without him. Even in the final moments, her confidence was performative. Bellatrix did not laugh when she died. She did not smirk. She did not whisper Voldemort's name. She simply fell, struck by a mother's love and a spell well placed. Her death was quick, undramatic, and in that silence we finally saw the truth. Bellatrix Lestrange, so loud, so violent, so flamboyantly mad, died without a sound. The true tragedy of Bellatrix Lestrange is not her evil. It is her emptiness. Her soul had been emptied long before the curse hit her chest. She filled that void with Voldemort, with power, with pain, but none of it kept death away. None of it made her immortal. And in the end, she died just like everyone else, alone, afraid, and forgotten the moment the next curse was cast. So no, Bellatrix Lestrange did not walk through fire without fear. She burned just like the rest of us, only she screamed on the inside, and the echo of that scream was mistaken for laughter. Number 22. She never loved her husband. She stood beside him in the courtroom, chin lifted, her eyes wild and gleaming with unrepentant pride. Bellatrix Lestrange, née Black, radiated fanaticism as she declared her loyalty to the Dark Lord. "The Dark Lord will rise again, Crouch. Throw us into Azkaban. We will wait," she shouted, her voice sharp and burning like a forge. Rodolphus Lestrange stood at her side, silent, his expression unreadable, but he did not flinch. He didn't argue. He didn't leave. He had already been there through every cursed spell and tortured scream, and he would continue to be there whether anyone noticed or not. It is a common misconception that Bellatrix never loved her husband, that he was little more than a title and a name, an accessory to her true obsession, the Dark Lord. But such a view ignores the complexity of her character, and worse, it erases Rodolphus entirely, as if he were a ghost following her shadow. Yet he bled beside her, fought beside her, and rotted with her in the suffocating gloom of Azkaban for more than a decade. That kind of loyalty is not the result of paperwork or polite alliances. It is forged in blood and silence. Bellatrix Black was never meant to marry for love. Born into the proud and ancient House of Black, love was rarely a subject of discussion, and marriage was a duty, a transaction between bloodlines. Her union with Rodolphus Lestrange was likely arranged with such cold practicality in mind. But Bellatrix was not a woman to be tamed by routine or trapped by formalities. If Rodolphus had been a fool, a coward, a weakling, he would have been discarded like a broken wand. The fact that she tolerated him at all, that she stood by him in moments of true fire and death, says something more profound than romance ever could. She never kissed him on the lips in public. No soft glances, no affectionate gestures. But she never humiliated him either. In Death Eater meetings, Bellatrix's voice rose louder than most, full of fire and madness, but she did not mock Rodolphus. She let him speak when he wished to, and when he cast spells beside her in the chaos of battle, she did not undermine him. Their dynamic was not that of lovers, it was of comrades, of soldiers whose cause transcended personal sentiment, and that in its own way was a kind of intimacy. When Sirius Black escaped from Azkaban, Bellatrix laughed in her cell. The walls were damp, the stones biting cold, and the cries of madness echoed day and night. Yet she had not gone mad, not truly, not the way some others had, and neither had Rodolphus. When they were finally broken out in 1996, their escape marked one of the most dangerous moments in the Second Wizarding War. Bellatrix walked free again, more vicious than ever. And Rodolphus? He returned to her side, unasked. He followed her to the Malfoy Manor, to the graveyards, to the killing grounds. A man doesn't do that for someone he doesn't believe in, and a woman like Bellatrix does not tolerate the company of someone she views as beneath her. There's something about surviving horror together that shapes bonds deeper than affection. In Azkaban there were no wand lights, no beds, no warmth. There were only screams, silence, and the chilling grip of dementors. Bellatrix, who had always prided herself on control, could have turned on anyone, blamed them for the Dark Lord's fall, accused them of weakness, but she didn't blame Rodolphus. She stayed close. In the cold dark, they sat side by side, staring at the same wet stones, remembering the same glorious fire. When Lord Voldemort returned, she did not beg him for forgiveness. "My lord, we have never renounced you," she cried, her voice as fierce as it had been 13 years before. And Rodolphus bowed beside her. If Voldemort had believed her loyalty flawed, she would have paid dearly. But he did not question it. Neither did Rodolphus. That kind of mutual purpose is not born of formality. It is forged in fanatical devotion and a quiet, unspoken understanding of where they both stood. Bellatrix's obsession with the Dark Lord was undeniable. She loved him, not in a romantic, soft-hearted way, but with the burning worship of a zealot. Her entire being bent toward him like iron drawn to a magnet. And Rodolphus knew. How could he not? He was not blind. He saw the way she looked at Voldemort, the trembling in her voice when she said his name. But he did not interfere. He never tried to stop her. There were no public arguments, no bitter displays of jealousy. Instead, he stayed. That quiet endurance says more than any lover's quarrel ever could. In the battle of the Department of Mysteries, she moved like flame through the halls, eyes blazing as she duelled with Kingsley Shacklebolt and Sirius Black. And Rodolphus was there too, fighting alongside his brother Rabaston, cursing anyone who stood in their way. When she struck down Sirius with that fatal burst of magic, she didn't turn to Rodolphus to celebrate. She didn't need to. He knew. That was her moment. He let her have it. That kind of wordless recognition between two people speaks volumes about their bond. They were not affectionate, not in the way one expects lovers to be, but Bellatrix was not built for softness. Her love was a weapon, and she wielded it only for her master. But respect? That's something else. And Rodolphus earned hers, not through gifts or poems, but by never wavering, not when she laughed like thunder, not when her curses painted the walls red. He stood in the same madness and didn't flinch. During the Second Wizarding War, Bellatrix was Voldemort's most loyal servant, but not the only one. Rodolphus remained by her side, involved in plans and missions, though history has tried to erase him, painting him as a background figure. But even in war, Bellatrix didn't seek to rid herself of him. She didn't cast him aside, though she easily could have. Her pride would never allow her to share space with someone unworthy. There is no record of them having children. Some interpret this as a sign of emotional distance, but perhaps it was a choice. Bellatrix never seemed to long for family in the traditional sense. She saw bloodlines as purity, not sentiment. Rodolphus, too, seemed content to serve the Dark Lord rather than build a legacy. Their union was not about reproduction, it was about alliance and ideology, and they were matched in that devotion. Some say Bellatrix's cruelty knew no bounds, but even cruelty has rules. She was vicious to traitors, to mudbloods, to anyone who failed the Dark Lord, but she never turned her wand on Rodolphus, not once, not even in rage. That silence between them, that truce of violence, is a mark of something deep, if not warm. Respect, again, perhaps even gratitude. When Narcissa Malfoy spoke to Snape about protecting Draco, she did not bring Rodolphus. She brought Bellatrix, because Bellatrix was the feared one, the unpredictable one. But Bellatrix's presence in that room wasn't just about power. She stood as the guardian of family honor, and Rodolphus, somewhere in the shadows, did not interfere. He understood her role. He did not compete with it. He did not need to. In the final battle at Hogwarts, Rodolphus is not named among the dead. His fate remains uncertain, but Bellatrix's end is clear. She died laughing, fighting Molly Weasley, the same wild look in her eyes that she had worn in the courtroom all those years ago. Voldemort's rage at her death was incandescent. And what of Rodolphus? Left behind, perhaps? Forgotten? Or perhaps, somewhere in the crumbling ruins, his world ended too, not with a curse, but with the shattering of the only person who had ever truly understood what it meant to worship something greater than oneself. To say that Bellatrix never loved Rodolphus is to misunderstand what love meant to her. She did not love the way others did. Her heart did not bloom with tenderness, it burned. And in that fire, Rodolphus stood unburned. Not adored, perhaps, but not discarded either. In a life shaped by war, ideology, and madness, companionship is rare. Bellatrix chose her battles, and she chose the ones she fought with. Rodolphus was one of them. Theirs was a union forged not in passion, but in the cold steel of shared belief. A camaraderie soaked in blood and silence. Not romantic, but not empty. To call it loveless is to ignore the complexity of what it means to stand beside someone through hell and never let go. Bellatrix may have died with Voldemort's name on her lips, but Rodolphus had long since earned his place in the shadows of her legend, not as a lover, but as a mirror to the madness that consumed them both. He never asked for her heart, and she never gave it, but she gave him space beside her in a world where she allowed very few to stand. That was enough. That was everything. Number 23, she always hated Sirius Black. She saw him first at a family gathering when they were just children. Sirius, with tousled dark hair, already defiant in his little black boots. Bellatrix had tried to show him her new wand. eager to teach him a hex their Aunt Walburga had demonstrated, but Sirius had only scoffed. "Magic isn't for scaring house elves," he'd said sharply, brushing past her. Bellatrix never forgot the sting of that moment, though she didn't hate him then. Not yet. At the time, she believed he simply needed guidance, a firmer hand to keep him loyal to the family line. They were cousins, born into one of the most ancient and noble houses in the wizarding world. The Blacks prided themselves on their pure blood, their line untainted by Muggle heritage. Bellatrix embraced these ideals with fanatical devotion. Sirius, on the other hand, was already beginning to resist the family's rigid mould. At 12, he'd begun voicing admiration for Muggle inventions. By 14, he was questioning the legitimacy of blood purity altogether. At 16, he ran away from home, leaving behind a scorched hole on the Black family tapestry, a literal burn mark where his name had once been stitched in silver thread. But even then, Bellatrix didn't truly hate him. She pitied him. She called him the lost cub in letters to her sister Narcissa, claiming that he had fallen under Dumbledore's corrupting influence. He might still return, she wrote once, if only someone would show him the truth. She believed that truth was Lord Voldemort's vision, a world cleansed of weakness, ruled by those of pure blood and pure will. In her mind, Sirius was merely confused, a prodigal son, a blood traitor, yes, but not irredeemable. Everything changed when Sirius joined the Order of the Phoenix. It wasn't merely a matter of ideology anymore. Bellatrix took it personally. The moment she discovered that her cousin had joined the ranks of Albus Dumbledore's underground resistance, she felt something inside her fracture. Sirius wasn't just rejecting his family, he was fighting against everything she held sacred. The Death Eaters whispered of raids gone awry, of Order members who fought back with merciless spells. And among their names, Black kept surfacing. But not the kind of Black they honored. He was the anti-Black, the traitor, the enemy within. The war twisted her. By the time she was 25, Bellatrix had fully given herself to the Dark Lord. She tortured for him, killed for him, laughed while doing it. Her heart had calcified around a singular obsession, purifying the wizarding world, and Sirius became her symbol of failure. Not just personal failure, but familial betrayal. "He spat on our name," she once shrieked during a fit of rage in Malfoy Manor. "Dragged it through the dirt with those Muggle lovers." In Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, Sirius describes his childhood home, 12 Grimmauld Place, as a house of repression and hatred. "I hated the lot of them," he tells Harry, gesturing at the dusty Black family portraits. Bellatrix is there, too, painted in a high-backed chair, her eyes glittering with smug disdain. She had long since disowned Sirius in return, but beneath the surface there was more than just disdain. There was a wound. She was wounded that he had chosen Potter over her, Dumbledore over Voldemort, the Order over the legacy of the Blacks. Years passed. Azkaban hardened her, but it didn't break her. She emerged more fanatical than ever. And when she saw Sirius again, during the battle at the Department of Mysteries, she saw not a cousin, but a heretic. Come out, little Sirius," she sang as she stalked the corridors, wand at the ready. But in the pages of Order of the Phoenix, her voice isn't gleeful. It's manic, desperate. There's an edge of hysteria when she screams, "I killed Sirius Black." And perhaps that's the key. It wasn't just murder, it was a purging, a ritual sacrifice of the family's last great shame. But her scream betrays something else. Not triumph, not truly, but anguish. Because once, long ago, she had believed he could be saved. Regulus Black, Sirius's younger brother, had taken the opposite path. He had joined Voldemort and even earned Bellatrix's respect. He had the right spirit, she told Narcissa. Pity he lacked the spine. When Regulus disappeared under mysterious circumstances, presumed dead after betraying the Dark Lord, Bellatrix felt the double betrayal of both brothers. She never spoke of Regulus again, but in her silence was fury and grief. Sirius, of course, had not seen his cousin since Azkaban, but when Harry asked him about her, Sirius's response was cutting. "Bellatrix, she's a true black, mad as her mother, cruel as her father. Don't ever trust her." But he didn't sound afraid. He sounded tired, bitter, as though he mourned the person she could have been, or perhaps the relationship they might have had if both had chosen different sides. Their final confrontation was brutal and sudden. In the Department of Mysteries, surrounded by broken prophecies and battling Death Eaters, Sirius duelled her without hesitation. Their spells clashed in midair, old family ties burnt away in magical fire. Harry described it as like watching shadows tear each other apart, and then, with a single jet of red light, Bellatrix struck him squarely in the chest. He fell through the veil, silent, stunned, and was gone. She didn't weep. She laughed, but her laughter was shrill, uneven. Harry, blinded by grief, chased her down. "You're the one who killed him," he screamed. And she replied, "I did. I killed Sirius Black." But there's a strange madness in her voice, not the laughter of joy, but of breaking. That line in Order of the Phoenix holds weight. The scream isn't victory, it's denial, as if saying it aloud will make it feel right, as if she's trying to convince herself. In Half-Blood Prince, Bellatrix tells Narcissa, "The Dark Lord trusts me, I alone can carry out his will." She says it with pride, but her eyes are haunted. Voldemort doesn't truly love anyone, and deep down Bellatrix knows this. Her hatred of Sirius might have been born from a longing for someone who did. He was her blood, her cousin, the last tether to her youth. Killing him didn't erase that. It only widened the hole. Her devotion to Voldemort consumed her. It was her last religion, a place to pour all the pain and confusion Sirius had left behind. Every time someone spoke the name Black, she flinched, not out of fear, but because it reminded her of who she had to become to survive that betrayal. And yet, in Deathly Hallows we catch a glimpse of what remains. When Harry mentions Sirius's name during the skirmish at Malfoy Manor, Bellatrix momentarily freezes, her wand trembles. She recovers quickly, hurling a Cruciatus curse, but the moment is there, a ghost in her expression. There's no redemption arc for Bellatrix Lestrange. She dies as she lived, fiercely loyal to Voldemort, hurling killing curses, cackling at death. But even monsters bleed, and her hatred for Sirius Black was never clean. It was tangled, emotional, personal. She didn't hate him from the start. She wanted him to come back, to kneel before the ideals she clung to prove that the Black family legacy could still be saved. When he chose otherwise, he didn't just break from her. He shattered her vision of who they were supposed to be. She called him lost, then called him traitor, then killed him. But in the quiet places between the screams, it's easy to wonder, did she ever mourn him? Did she ever remember that little boy who turned away from her hex with disgust, not hate? Bellatrix Lestrange hated Sirius Black, but not from the beginning. And perhaps that's what makes her story so tragic. Not that she killed him, but that once, just once, she hoped he wouldn't make her choose. Number 24. She was a bad sister to Andromeda. Of all the sins that can haunt a heart, betrayal by blood leaves the deepest scar. Bellatrix Lestrange, fierce, fanatical, and feared, has long been painted as a cold-hearted sister to Andromeda. Many remember her sneering disdain for the woman who dared to marry a Muggle-born. But that venom, though real, did not spring from a frozen well. It boiled up from something far more painful: disappointment, fury, and a deep-seated sense of personal betrayal. Bellatrix, the eldest of the Black Sisters, was not always the shrill voice of pure-blood supremacy we meet in the war-torn years of Voldemort's reign. In their youth, the three sisters, Bellatrix, Andromeda, and Narcissa, were known to roam the halls of Black Manor together, giggling behind closed doors, whispering dreams they'd never confessed to their mother. Bellatrix, being the oldest, often played the role of both protector and commander. She was sharp, willful, and demanding. Andromeda, with her gentle defiance and silent wisdom, often clashed with Bella, but never with cruelty. Not then. Walburga Black, their aunt, once commented with an approving nod, "That one," pointing to Bellatrix, "knows what it means to be a true Black." And Bellatrix clung to that praise like a badge of honor. Every choice she made, every cruel word she would later speak, was rooted in that obsessive loyalty to the family's ideals. But in those younger days, she saw herself as a leader, someone tasked with watching over her sisters, not tearing them down. Andromeda was different, of course, always too soft-spoken, too questioning. When Bellatrix read aloud passages from Nature's Nobility, a Wizarding Genealogy, Andromeda would glance out the window, her thoughts drifting far from the prideful words on the page. Once, during a summer in Wiltshire, Bellatrix confronted her. "You don't believe any of it, do you?" she snapped. Andromeda just smiled sadly and said, "I believe people are worth more than their blood." It was a moment Bellatrix never forgot. It wasn't Ted Tonks that broke their bond, not at first. The rift came long before Andromeda married the Muggleborn. It began when Bellatrix realized her sister was slipping away from the Black legacy, when Andromeda expressed admiration for Muggle authors, when she befriended a Hufflepuff half-blood in her 6th year. These acts, small to others, were betrayals in Bellatrix's eyes. "She's rotting from the inside," she once hissed to Narcissa, infected by weakness. And yet, she kept visiting her, even after Andromeda graduated, even after whispers of Ted Tonks reached the family. There's a memory, known only to the wind and the walls of a tea shop in Diagon Alley. Bellatrix, hooded, stepped in one autumn evening. Andromeda was there, her fingers laced with Ted's, her laughter soft and private. Bellatrix watched them from the shadows. She didn't interrupt, she didn't hex them, she simply left. It was the last time she saw her sister before the name Andromeda was scorched from the Black family tapestry. Later, in Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, Sirius would gesture to that very wall in Grimmauld Place. "My mother blasted her off after she married a Muggleborn, Ted Tonks. Nice bloke, actually." The casual tone in Sirius's voice masked the violence of that act. To be blasted from the family tree wasn't just symbolic, it was erasure, disownment, a declaration of war. But while the rest of the family moved on, Bellatrix burned. Her fury was not the cold disdain of a stranger. It was intimate, personal. "She betrayed everything we stood for," Bellatrix once spat to Lucius Malfoy at a gathering. "She spat on our blood." There was no regret in her voice, but pain hid in the fury, as sharp as a knife wrapped in silk. She never forgave, and she never forgot. During the Second Wizarding War, when Andromeda's daughter, Nymphadora Tonks, joined the Order of the Phoenix, Bellatrix saw it as the final insult. Her niece, her own blood, fighting for Dumbledore's cause, marrying a werewolf. "You dirty half-blood!" she screamed at Tonks during their duel at the Department of Mysteries. But the insult wasn't just for Nymphadora. It echoed backward through time and blood to the sister Bellatrix had once loved and lost. "She's as weak as her mother," Bellatrix growled to Voldemort later, when discussing the Order's movements. The Dark Lord, amused, had merely smirked. But Bellatrix's voice quivered at the edges, betraying something deeper. Hate? Yes, but pain too, perhaps even longing. What's often forgotten is that Bellatrix didn't blast Andromeda's name off the wall. It was Walburga. Bellatrix, even in her madness, never took that wand to the tree. She ranted, she cursed, but she let someone else carry out the final act of exile. Was it cowardice or a flicker of sentiment? When Harry Potter first meets Andromeda in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, he's stunned by her resemblance to Bellatrix. "You look exactly like Bellatrix Lestrange," he blurts. Andromeda's face hardens. My dear sister was not known for her tolerance, she says coldly. But something in her eyes softens when she speaks of Tonks. There is pride, and there is grief, and beneath that perhaps a buried pain she never voiced. For all her kindness, Andromeda had once looked up to Bellatrix. And Bellatrix, despite everything, had once loved her. In Azkaban, long before her escape, Bellatrix's mind unravelled, but not completely. She muttered names in the dark. Sissy, Bella, Mehda. That last name, whispered like a ghost, barely made it past her cracked lips. It was not spoken with hatred. It was spoken with memory. She was a bad sister to Andromeda, yes, cruel, relentless, unbending. But she was not born that way. Her hate was learned, her fury fed by ideology. But the foundation, the core of what once was between them, had been real. The shared childhood, the secret letters. The night they stayed up whispering about the stars, lying on the roof of Black Manor, talking about the names they carried, Andromeda, the chained one, Bellatrix, the warrior, Narcissa, the daffodil. We're cursed with beautiful names, Andromeda once joked. And cursed to live up to them, Bellatrix had replied. And she tried. Merlin help her, she tried. She tried to be the perfect black, to follow the path carved out by centuries of dark magic and prejudice. And when Andromeda veered from that path, it felt to Bellatrix like the world itself cracked. She didn't just lose a sister, she lost a mirror. Someone who might have pulled her in another direction, someone who might have saved her. In another life, one less steeped in bloodlines and war, perhaps Bellatrix and Andromeda would have grown old together, laughing at childhood dreams and drinking tea under the same roof. Perhaps Bellatrix would have learned to forgive. Perhaps Andromeda would have helped her see another way. But in the world they lived in, love often wore armor. And Bellatrix's armor became her prison, so she was a bad sister, but not a loveless one, and sometimes that's the cruelest kind. Number 25. Bellatrix thought herself superior to other Death Eaters. In the gloomy corridors of Malfoy Manor, as the wind howled through the cracks in the windows and the firelight flickered on cold stone walls, one figure always seemed to command attention: Bellatrix Lestrange. Cloaked in black and madness, she was a formidable presence among Voldemort's inner circle. But while many believe she considered herself far superior to her fellow Death Eaters, the truth of Bellatrix's arrogance is more complex. She was certainly proud, sometimes dangerously so, but her pride was tempered by a hierarchy that only she understood. Within that hierarchy, loyalty to the Dark Lord and magical strength earned respect. All others were beneath her contempt. Bellatrix's madness was theatrical, often misunderstood as senseless chaos, yet behind her wild eyes and bloodlust lay a calculating sense of order. Her interactions with other Death Eaters reveal that her disdain was not distributed evenly. While she openly mocked weak or disloyal followers, she held quiet admiration for those who proved their devotion with action. Take Antonin Dolohov, for instance, a seasoned dark wizard who had spent time in Azkaban for his crimes. Bellatrix never once treated him as a lesser. In Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, Dolohov is among the Death Eaters summoned to the Department of Mysteries, and Bellatrix fights alongside him with coordinated ease. There's no hesitation, no scorn in her tone when speaking to him. To her, Dolohov was a worthy soldier. Her interactions with Barty Crouch Jr. further illustrate this layered perspective. Crouch Jr., despite being young, had sacrificed everything, his freedom, his identity, even his family, for Voldemort. Bellatrix recognized that. In Goblet of Fire, when Voldemort speaks of the faithful who sought him out even when he was thought dead, he singles out Barty. He is my most faithful servant. Bellatrix never contested that. In fact, when she later addresses her own loyalty, she almost echoes that sentiment. "The Dark Lord lives within me," she says fanatically in Half-Blood Prince. She and Barty Jr. shared that same Religious fervor. She saw him as a kindred spirit, not a rival. However, that didn't stop her from lashing out at others who she felt had faltered. When Snape, whose loyalty she deeply distrusted, was accepted into Voldemort's inner circle, she could barely contain her fury. Her suspicion towards Snape wasn't solely based on jealousy. It was because she couldn't read his soul, and that made him dangerous. In The Half-Blood Prince, during her visit to Spinner's End with Narcissa, Bellatrix confronts Snape directly. "You're being modest, Severus. You're not just a Death Eater, you're his favorite now, aren't you?" The venom in her voice isn't hidden. She didn't respect Snape because she believed he hadn't earned his place the way others had. He hadn't suffered. He hadn't sacrificed. Bellatrix's perception of superiority was a lens through which she measured pain, devotion, and magical prowess. In this regard, she found Lucius Malfoy lacking. Once a golden member of the Dark Lord's court, Lucius fell from grace after the debacle at the Department of Mysteries. In Half-Blood Prince, Bellatrix mocks his failure and hints at her disdain. If you hadn't failed the Dark Lord, perhaps Draco wouldn't be in this position now. The implication is cruel and sharp. Bellatrix's respect wasn't given, it was won in blood. It's important to note, however, that Bellatrix's pride did not stem from a belief in her own brilliance alone, but in her pure-blood status and the honor of the House of Black. She wasn't just a follower, she was a chosen daughter of noble blood, molded to serve the Dark Lord's vision of a purer world. When she sneered at others, it wasn't always personal, it was ideological. Half-bloods, blood traitors, cowards, these were beneath her. She viewed even her own sister Andromeda as filth for marrying a Muggle-born. "She is no sister of mine," Bellatrix spits in Deathly Hallows with enough venom to curdle the air. But in that same breath, she shows a twisted kind of familial loyalty to Narcissa, her younger sister. When Narcissa disobeys Voldemort's order to protect her son Draco, Bellatrix is torn. She threatens her, pleads with her, tries to physically stop her from seeking Snape's help, but she doesn't kill her. Her loyalty to the Dark Lord collides with her love for her sister, and for a brief moment, the superiority complex crumbles. Bellatrix is not without emotion. Her emotions are just violently tethered to her ideology. Her allegiance to Voldemort was absolute, and it shaped how she judged everyone around her. This made her unique among Death Eaters. Most were driven by ambition, fear, or opportunity. Bellatrix, however, worshipped. She did not seek power for herself, she sought to become an extension of his will. That is why, during the Battle of the Department of Mysteries, when others were falling back, Bellatrix pressed forward. She taunted Harry, killed Sirius, and escaped only when necessary. Even then, her fury at failing the Dark Lord was greater than her fear of capture. "I'm sorry, Master," she sobbed during their escape. Her shame was real. In her eyes, failure was worse than death. Her scorn for those who lacked her devotion was unmistakable. When she confronted Narcissa in Spinner's End, she did so not as a sister, but as a priestess of a higher order. "You should be honored, Sissy. The Dark Lord thinks your son worthy to carry out a mission." Her tone was both fanatical and patronizing. She truly believed that serving the Dark Lord, even unto death, was the highest privilege. Those who hesitated, who begged for mercy or questioned orders, were not worthy of respect. Yet despite all her cruelty, Bellatrix wasn't blind to power. She admired strength even in enemies. When dueling Hermione in Deathly Hallows, she doesn't simply try to kill her. She toys with her, tests her. Hermione had earned a measure of Bellatrix's attention, if not her respect. And when Molly Weasley defeats her in the final battle, Bellatrix is shocked, not just by the attack, but by the audacity of someone like Molly. Her face, frozen in disbelief before death claims her, reflects a shattered hierarchy. To Bellatrix, someone like Molly should never have had the power to kill her. Her downfall is poetic in that way. Bellatrix's belief in hierarchies, pure blood over Muggleborn, loyalty over strategy, cruelty over compassion, proved to be her blind spot. She underestimated the quiet, unremarkable woman who dared to fight for love, and that, ultimately, was her undoing. Still, we cannot deny that Bellatrix's internal code made her unique among Death Eaters. She wasn't mindless, and she wasn't purely driven by ego. She chose who to honor and who to dismiss. In Azkaban, she never begged for pardon. When Voldemort resurrected, she wept with joy. In the Order of the Phoenix, when captured, she screamed, "The Dark Lord will rise again, and he will reward us beyond our dreams." There was no doubt, no fear. Bellatrix believed. That belief extended to others, like Rodolphus Lestrange, her husband. Though she rarely showed him affection, she never publicly belittled him the way she did others. Rodolphus had suffered in Azkaban for Voldemort's cause. That earned her respect, even if not her love. The same cannot be said for others like Crabbe and Goyle, whom she openly mocked for their incompetence. To Bellatrix, they were tools, nothing more. She saw herself as a blade, sharp, loyal, and ready. Not everyone deserved the honor of being near the Dark Lord. She knew her place in his world, and she protected it with ferocity. But that didn't mean she was blind to the qualities of others. Her twisted form of admiration was rare but real. In a world where betrayal was common, Bellatrix was constant. In the end, her sense of superiority wasn't a mask, it was a code, one that rewarded loyalty, punished weakness, and bowed only to Voldemort himself. Those who stood with her in pain, in fire, and in madness, those few like Dolohov and Barty Jr., she welcomed as kin. The rest she scorned with the kind of hatred that only love for something greater can produce. Bellatrix Lestrange didn't think she was better than everyone. She just believed she was better than those who weren't ready to die for the cause. Number 26. She was incapable of mercy. Bellatrix Lestrange was a creature forged in madness and fire. Her presence burned like a fever in the veins of those who stood too close. She was, to many, a vision of unrelenting cruelty, unapologetically vicious, with a voice that rang with laughter in the face of pain. But perhaps the most terrifying thing about her was the conviction behind her savagery. And yet, buried deep beneath her frenzy and bloodlust, there were moments, strange and fleeting, when something softer flickered, moments that most would miss or dismiss. But they were there. It was in Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince that this strange glint first broke through the obsidian glass of Bellatrix's character. She stood in the drawing-room of Malfoy Manor, her black eyes narrowed, her mouth twitching with irritation, not at her enemies, but at her own master. She argued with Lord Voldemort, argued. That in itself was almost unthinkable. "My lord is wise," she began cautiously, "but the boy is young." She was referring to Draco Malfoy, her nephew, and what rang beneath her words was not disdain or ambition, but fear, real, clenching fear, not for herself, but for him. Bellatrix knew what the Dark Lord was asking. He was sending Draco to kill Dumbledore, a suicide mission. And though Bellatrix had killed without blinking, tortured without remorse, she did not want Draco to die. "If I had sons, I would be glad to give them up to the service of the Dark Lord," she spat at Snape, though her voice cracked under the weight of her performance. But it was an act. Beneath the fire, a flicker of something trembled, mercy, twisted and tightly controlled, but mercy nonetheless. This moment was not born of weakness. It wasn't even kindness. It was loyalty, twisted into something grotesque, yes, but still recognizably human. Bellatrix loved her family. In a world where she had scorched nearly every connection she'd ever had, the Malfoy name remained sacred. Her affection was not general, it was not for humanity, but it did exist, in the shadows, in the corners. Her relationship with Narcissa speaks volumes. Bellatrix could spit venom at anyone, including other Death Eaters, but to her sister she spoke with softness, a gentler tone that hardly matched her usual persona. When Narcissa came to her in desperation, begging her to accompany her to Spinner's End to speak with Severus Snape, Bellatrix protested not out of arrogance, but out of concern. "The Dark Lord has forbidden it," she whispered, grabbing her sister's arm. "You must not speak of this." But Narcissa insisted, and Bellatrix followed, not because she believed it wise, but because she could not let her sister walk alone. This is not the behavior of a creature without mercy. This is the behavior of someone who has buried it so deeply it can only come out in code, loyalty, protectiveness, and rage on behalf of those few she claims as hers. And in the dark corners of her heart, Bellatrix carved out a place for Narcissa, a rare, dangerous place. She sat beside her sister during Snape's unbreakable vow. She watched, silent and wide-eyed, as Narcissa clasped hands with Severus. Bellatrix's wand trembled slightly, her fingers tightened on it, her face was stony, but her soul, the part she tried so desperately to kill, stirred. It stirred at the sight of her sister's desperation. She hated Snape, she hated everyone but her master. But for Narcissa she stood still, a silent witness to a promise forged in blood and desperation. Bellatrix's vision of the world was simple, power and loyalty. But that simplicity cracked when love crept in. Her version of love was not gentle, it was obsessive, possessive, burning. But it was still love. When she spoke of the Dark Lord, her voice became almost reverent, like a fanatic whispering prayers. She did not simply serve him, she adored him. She longed to be chosen, to be his favorite, to be useful. And that longing betrayed something rare, the desire to be seen. Underneath her brutal exterior, Bellatrix wanted to matter. She did not show mercy to her enemies. She laughed when she tortured Hermione, giggled at the screams, revelled in cruelty. But these acts, vile as they were, do not erase the moments when she hesitated, moments when her fury was not blind but directed, when she chose not to act or acted out of fear for someone she loved. These moments are easy to ignore because they are inconvenient. They do not fit the image we want to believe. In Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, during the battle at Malfoy Manor, Bellatrix nearly lost control when Griphook touched the sword of Gryffindor. "You dare!" she screamed, her voice rising in shrill horror. "How dare you touch it, you filthy little goblin!" But her fury was not just at the goblin. It was panic. She feared Voldemort's wrath, not for herself, but for what would happen to the Malfoys. Her rage, exaggerated and theatrical, masked real terror. The vault had been violated, her loyalty had failed, and her family was in danger. She didn't pause to kill Griphook, though she could have. She didn't immediately cast the Cruciatus. She panicked. That panic was her tell. For once, Bellatrix Lestrange didn't know what to do, and in that moment of chaos, she was more human than she had ever appeared. Her interactions with Harry, though always violent, were strangely personal. She hated him not merely as an enemy of the Dark Lord, but as a boy who symbolized everything she could not understand: love, selflessness, compassion. When she killed Sirius Black, she screamed with delight, but the moment after was more revealing. "I killed Sirius Black," she sang, taunting Harry. But when he chased her, she was shaken. He fought with fury. She could not understand where that fire came from. Not ambition, not revenge, but love. And perhaps that frightened her. She mocked him, of course. She always mocked. "You have to mean it, Potter!" she shrieked when he tried to use the Cruciatus curse. "You need to really want to cause pain to enjoy it." And she was right. Harry didn't mean it, because Harry wasn't like her. But her words exposed more than just cruelty. They exposed truth. She recognized the line between herself and others. She knew mercy when she saw it. She just chose to reject it. Even her final moments in the Battle of Hogwarts were telling. Bellatrix duelled Molly Weasley, a mother who fought not for power, but for her child. The duel was fast and brutal. Bellatrix laughed, danced, spun with glee. But there was something different in this battle. She underestimated Molly. She didn't believe someone like Molly could be a threat. Because Molly fought with something Bellatrix couldn't name, something she'd forgotten. And when the final curse hit, it wasn't just Bellatrix's body that shattered, it was the illusion. The illusion that cruelty is eternal, that hate is stronger. Her death wasn't just a loss for Voldemort, it was a reminder that power without compassion is hollow. That even the fiercest warriors fall before mercy when it is wielded with love and purpose. But perhaps the most haunting part of Bellatrix's story is this. She was capable of something better. Somewhere in the deepest hollows of her fractured soul were pieces of the girl she had once been, before Azkaban, before the Dark Lord, before the madness, pieces that surfaced only in the presence of family, in the silence between screams. There's no denying her crimes. She destroyed lives, she relished in pain, she murdered without remorse, but to say she was incapable of mercy is to ignore the rare, bitter starlight in the endless night. Mercy, to Bellatrix Lestrange, was a weakness, but it was not alien. She recognized it. She simply refused to embrace it. And that is perhaps what makes her so tragic. Not that she was evil, but that she chose to be. Again and again, even when the door cracked open and light streamed in, she slammed it shut. In another world, Bellatrix could have been a protector, not a destroyer. She could have stood beside Narcissa in defense, not fear. She could have shielded Draco not from punishment, but from darkness itself. She could have been a hero, but she wasn't. And yet, in those fleeting, fragile moments, when her voice softened, when her hands trembled, when her eyes flicked with something that might have been sorrow, we see her shadow. Not the monster, but the woman, the sister, the aunt, the lover, the believer. She could not be merciful. But once, maybe, she tried. Number 27. Bellatrix believed she was above the law. Bellatrix Lestrange stood in the middle of the courtroom, unflinching and proud, her dark eyes gleaming with madness and resolve. The chained benches around her groaned with the weight of other Death Eaters, but it was Bellatrix who drew all attention. The Dementors hovered above the tribunal, cold and wraith-like, yet even their oppressive presence could not dampen the fervor that radiated from her like a fire. She did not beg, did not cry, did not deny. She smiled. The court, convened at the height of Voldemort's first downfall, had not come for justice. It had come for punishment. Bellatrix, along with her husband Rodolphus, his brother Rabastan, and Barty Crouch Jr., had been captured for torturing Frank and Alice Longbottom into insanity. They used the Cruciatus curse until the two Aurors had nothing left in their minds but fragments, and still Bellatrix had not flinched. "The Dark Lord will rise again," she declared before the Wizengamot, her voice ringing out with a conviction that chilled even her fellow prisoners. What shocked the room was not her crime, for the wizarding world had already learned of her atrocities, but her pride in them. Most criminals cowered before the court, pleaded, denied, wept. Bellatrix, in contrast, revelled. She wore her guilt like a crown. She was not merely admitting her deeds, she was glorifying them. And in that moment it became clear that she believed her cause, and by extension herself, to be greater than any law devised by men in robes. She did not see herself as a murderer or a terrorist. She saw herself as a warrior. To Bellatrix, the law was not some sacred parchment, but a political tool, one wielded by the weak to restrain the strong. The Ministry of Magic, in her eyes, was not an institution of order, but a nest of traitors and half-blood sympathizers. Her scorn was not born of ignorance. It was rooted in ideology. Bellatrix did not ignore the law, she rejected its authority to judge her. This distinction is crucial. Many believe Bellatrix simply assumed she was untouchable, drunk on her own power and shielded by the Dark Lord's influence. But the truth is more complex. She knew the stakes. She understood the risks. And she accepted them, embraced them, because for her, punishment was proof of loyalty. She wanted to suffer for Voldemort. She wanted the world to know she had sacrificed everything, even her freedom, for his vision. There is a moment in Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix when Sirius Black tells Harry, "The world isn't split into good people and Death Eaters." But Bellatrix might have disagreed. For her, there were only the faithful and the traitors, the obedient and the impure. And those who defied the Dark Lord were not just enemies, they were beneath her. Her belief in blood purity was absolute, and she viewed herself as a holy warrior on a sacred mission. After Azkaban, she did not return broken. Most prisoners emerged from those cold, haunted cells as husks, silent, broken, empty. But Bellatrix returned hungry. When Voldemort freed her during the mass breakout in the Order of the Phoenix, she howled with laughter, her mind untouched by years of Dementor torment. "The Lestranges should stand here," Voldemort had told his followers in the Goblet of Fire. "They are loyal. They went to Azkaban for me." Bellatrix had heard those words, and they had fueled her. Her first act of true resurgence was tragic. In the Department of Mysteries, Bellatrix led the attack on the Order, killing her own cousin Sirius in cold blood. Come out, little Harry," she taunted after the murder, taunting the boy whose godfather had just vanished through the veil. And this was not the act of a woman hiding behind shadows. This was a declaration, a woman who murders her family in public and then dares the boy to fight her, is not afraid of law. She spits in its face. Her arrogance in that moment was staggering. But it was not born from delusion. Bellatrix had fought the Ministry, endured Azkaban, watched Voldemort fall and rise again. She had walked through fire and come out laughing. She did not believe she was above the law because of privilege. She believed it because law itself was irrelevant when placed against the will of the Dark Lord. His word was her law. And yet, in Half-Blood Prince, we see a different facet of this fanaticism. When Snape invokes the unbreakable vow, Bellatrix watches with suspicion. She does not trust easily. Her loyalty is fierce but narrow. Her concept of honor is warped, forged in madness and devotion. When she teaches Draco occlumency, it's not kindness, it's preparation. She expects sacrifice. She demands it from others because she has made it herself. The law cannot contain such a soul. The Ministry, meanwhile, is always steps behind. It hunts Bellatrix with the fury of a wounded institution, chasing her like a symbol of everything it failed to contain. But the woman it seeks is not hiding. She moves in the open, burning cottages, cursing innocents, fighting battles with sadistic glee. She never pretends to be moral. She never offers justification. Her only defense is that she fights for purity, for order, for a vision no one else dares imagine. And in Deathly Hallows, her power reaches a new peak. Voldemort grants her the most sacred of tasks, guarding the Lestrange vault in Gringotts. It is a reward for her loyalty, yes, but also a symbol of all his followers. She is the most unshakable. "My lord," she whispers, always on her knees before him, always ready to kill or die. And when Hermione disguises herself as Bellatrix to break into Gringotts, the goblins recoil in fear. Even a shadow of Bellatrix inspires terror. But her downfall, like her rise, is poetic. At the Battle of Hogwarts, Bellatrix duels Molly Weasley. The contrast could not be greater, the mad, childless fanatic versus the mother defending her children. Bellatrix laughs, dances, jeers. She nearly kills Ginny. And then, in a moment of pure maternal fury, Molly strikes. "Not my daughter, you bitch!" she screams, and the curse hits true. Bellatrix, the untouchable, the believer, the warrior, falls. Her death is not simply a tactical victory, it is symbolic. Bellatrix, who thought herself invincible, slain not by an aura, not by the ministry, not by Harry, but by a mother, by someone fighting not for ideology, but for love. The spell that killed Bellatrix was not just magic, it was justice served in its rawest, purest form, and she never saw it coming. Even in death, Bellatrix's face is described as shocked, not fearful, but surprised, as if she could not believe the world had finally caught up to her, as if the laws of man, or nature, or magic had no right to claim her. But they did. The law she spat upon had its revenge, not through bureaucracy, but through people, through hearts that refused to let her brand of cruelty reign unchecked. Bellatrix Lestrange was not a woman confused about right and wrong. She was not driven by ignorance or even personal ambition. She knew what she was doing, she believed in it, and she believed that belief alone placed her above judgment. Her crimes were not concealed, they were proudly displayed. She walked into the courtroom smiling, walked out of Azkaban laughing, and faced death still casting curses. "I was and am the Dark Lord's most loyal servant," she once told Narcissa. There was no shame in her voice, only pride. In that single line, Bellatrix Lestrange gave away her soul. She was not a soldier, she was a zealot. The law to her was a relic of a weaker world. Her life was one long act of defiance, and her death a shattering of the illusion that such defiance comes without cost. She thought herself above the law, but in truth she had placed herself beyond redemption. And that perhaps is the cruelest judgment of all. Number 28, she didn't care about money. Bellatrix Lestrange stood in the vaults of Gringotts, her eyes wild, hair unkempt, and voice trembling with a fear that was uncharacteristic of the usually composed and ruthless witch. The moment she realized someone had entered her family's vault, someone unworthy, a half-blood like Hermione Granger, and worse, blood traitors and a muggle born in her sacred space, her facade cracked. Her horror was not just about Voldemort's wrath. No, her panic was rooted in something deeper, something personal. Her bloodline, her status, and yes, her wealth had been violated. Many fans of the Harry Potter universe imagine Bellatrix as a fanatic who lived and breathed only for Lord Voldemort. They paint her as a woman who had transcended worldly concerns like gold or privilege, having replaced all such desires with a twisted form of devotion to the Dark Lord. But this interpretation only scratches the surface. Beneath her fanatical loyalty lay the heart of a woman who cared deeply about what her family name represented. And wealth in the wizarding world was inseparable from legacy. It is no accident that Bellatrix was born a Black. The Black family motto, toujours pur, always pure, was etched not only into their family crest, but into the very psyche of its daughters. Bellatrix, as the eldest of Cygnus and Druella Black's children, was not just expected to uphold the family's traditions, she embodied them. Her marriage to Rodolphus Lestrange, another member of the Sacred 28, cemented a union of two pure-blood fortunes. She did not marry for love. She married to maintain the purity, wealth, and influence that had been passed down for centuries. And it was that influence that she guarded so obsessively. When the trio, Harry, Ron, and Hermione, used Polyjuice Potion to impersonate her and entered Gringotts, Bellatrix's reaction was almost apocalyptic. "They've been in my vault," she screamed, her voice shrill and broken, "in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows." She did not say, "They've taken the cup," or "The Dark Lord will kill me." Instead, her horror began with the idea of intrusion itself. How dare they step into a vault that was a symbol of her bloodline's power? The Lestrange vault was not merely a place to store objects, it was a fortress of status. This overreaction cannot be explained away as fear for the Horcrux. Bellatrix did not know what the cup truly was. Only Voldemort knew that Helga Hufflepuff's cup held a fragment of his soul. What Bellatrix knew was that her vault had been entrusted with an object of great importance to the Dark Lord. Her panic, therefore, was twofold: one part allegiance to Voldemort, but the other a fiercely personal terror that her family's legacy had been breached. "The vault had been broken into, and they've taken something," she shrieked to Griphook and the goblins, not knowing what had been stolen, but fearing the symbolic damage already done. Gringotts is no ordinary bank. In the wizarding world, a vault at Gringotts, especially one guarded by dragons and spells and secrecy, was the ultimate marker of status. And Bellatrix's vault was not just any vault. It was a deep chamber full of ancient treasures and cursed artifacts, reflecting centuries of dark wealth accumulated through both Lestrange and Black bloodlines. As described in the book, it was a cave-like room full of golden goblets, silver armor, jewel-studded chalices, and crowns that glittered with rubies and emeralds. Such opulence was more than wealth, it was identity. To desecrate it was to shame the blood that flowed in her veins. Bellatrix had never been indifferent to privilege. From the moment she entered Hogwarts, she was acutely aware of her status as a Black. She carried herself like royalty, sneering at students she considered beneath her. She looked down on her own sisters, especially Andromeda, who had the audacity to marry a Muggle-born. Andromeda's fall from grace was not just a betrayal of blood, it was a betrayal of tradition, of legacy, of wealth. To Bellatrix, being poor was not just unfortunate, it was shameful. Even within the Death Eaters, Bellatrix saw herself as aristocracy among foot soldiers. She did not tolerate competition from the likes of Severus Snape, whose half-blood status irked her. "You dare to talk to me like that, you filthy half-blood?" she snapped once, her disdain as sharp as any curse. Her loyalty to Voldemort did not mean equality. She saw herself as an elite servant of a greater power, and her wealth and heritage were proof of that elite status. She was no mindless fanatic. She was a believer who expected her devotion to be recognized and her name to be revered. If money meant nothing to Bellatrix, why would she protect the Lestrange name so violently? Why would she care about who entered her vault or who held her family's heirlooms? In the Half-Blood Prince, the Black family tapestry at 12 Grimmauld Place shows names burnt away, names like Andromeda's, cut off from inheritance, from legacy. Bellatrix did not see this as cruelty. She saw it as justice. You do not deserve wealth or history if you betray your blood. Wealth, to her, was sacred, not because it bought luxury, but because it was proof of purity. When Hermione disguised herself as Bellatrix and walked into Gringotts, her imitation was shaky, nervous, unsure, and yet it was convincing enough to fool goblins who had rarely seen Bellatrix in person. What gave Hermione away in the end was not her appearance, but her behavior. Bellatrix, the real Bellatrix, would never be uncertain, never grovel before goblins. She would walk like she owned the bank itself. She would command, not plead. Her relationship with Gringotts was that of a queen to her treasurer, and it makes perfect sense. The pure-blood elite believed Gringotts owed them protection, not the other way around. To understand Bellatrix is to understand the intersection of fanaticism and privilege. She was not a nun in Voldemort's cult. She was his knight, armored in ancient gold and family pride. She did not renounce wealth, she wielded it. The Lestrange fortune, hidden in the deepest vaults of Gringotts, was as much her weapon as her wand. Every artifact was a reminder that she came from power, and that power would be inherited by no one unworthy. That is why her vault had been chosen to hide the cup. Voldemort trusted her not just because of loyalty, but because of legacy. And even Voldemort, for all his disdain for sentimentality, understood the power of old money. He may have hated pure-blood arrogance, but he used it when it served him. Bellatrix's vault was chosen not just for its security, but for what it represented, a temple of old wizarding supremacy. That's why Harry, Ron, and Hermione's invasion was so powerful. It was not just a break-in, it was a symbolic revolution. 3 children from half-blood and Muggle-born backgrounds penetrated a sanctum that had withstood centuries. The fear in Bellatrix's eyes after the break-in told a story that no unforgivable curse could erase. She was terrified not only for herself, but for the crumbling of the world she believed in. It was not just Voldemort's wrath that haunted her. It was the idea that her bloodline, her family, her gold, her sacred position in the world could be tarnished by the very people she had spent her life despising. That was a defeat no Cruciatus curse could soothe. We must remember, too, that Bellatrix was raised in a home where gold was as abundant as prejudice. The Blacks were one of the richest wizarding families, and they passed down not just money, but ideology. Bellatrix learned to see money as proof of worth. She was told that wealth meant power and power meant right. She did not want riches to buy luxury, she wanted them to confirm her superiority. This is why, despite her madness, she dressed regally, carried herself with noble disdain, and looked down at the world as if from a marble balcony. Some might argue that Bellatrix spent years in Azkaban and emerged looking like a ghost, a shadow of her former self, suggesting that wealth meant little in the end. But even then, her hunger for status remained. She did not beg for food or clothes. She returned to the world ready to kill, to reclaim her place, to serve the only figure who, in her mind, could restore the old order. Her madness didn't erase her values, it sharpened them. In her broken mind, Voldemort was not just a leader, he was a king who would restore the pureblood throne. And so, when her vault was breached, it was not just an object that was stolen, it was her identity. A Muggle-born had walked on marble floors meant for her ancestors, a blood traitor had touched gold meant for sacred hands, and she had failed to stop it. Her screams at Gringotts were not just fear, they were mourning. Something sacred had been defiled, and to a woman like Bellatrix, who had lived her life obsessed with blood and inheritance, there could be no deeper betrayal. In the end, Bellatrix was not poor in spirit. She was rich with obsession. Her loyalty to Voldemort was not a trade for wealth, it was an extension of it. She believed that in his victory her bloodline would be honored, her status restored, and her family name made immortal. Her panic at Gringotts was the scream of someone watching their ancestral palace crumble to dust. So let us abandon the myth that Bellatrix didn't care about money. She did, but not in the way of goblins counting coins. She cared because money was proof of blood, it was proof of worth, it was power shaped in gold and forged in family vaults. Bellatrix Lestrange may have died on the battlefield, but what truly killed her was the theft of her world, one vault at a time.